All right, everybody, welcome to a special episode of Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard, live here on the Believe Network. New York Daily News, NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. The NFL schedule release here on May 15th, Wednesday evening. We are live. We are ready to go. The Giants schedule is out. The NFL schedule is in. I want to hear your predictions. I want to hear why. And I want to chop it up about what the Giants are going to do early season to get themselves going, and some of these tough skids they have in the middle and late end of the season, how they're going to be able to navigate that. In your guys' opinion and in mine, I'm going to share predictions game by game with you of how I think the Giants will fare, and we will bat it around and discuss what the Giants need to do to get off to a fast start, starting in week one against, as we've all seen now, the Minnesota Vikings coming to New Jersey and MetLife Stadium. I wanted to give a shout out first to Chris Rosa, at Giants Carb Crush on X for the New York Giants Rush podcast. Chris is the first person I saw post the accurate Giants schedule he is the first person that I saw post the accurate Giants schedule on social media. And I wanted to give Chris a shout out. That's great work by him. Obviously, we hear rumors and chatter throughout the day about what it's going to mean for these teams. And, sometimes you have inaccuracies. Sometimes things get reported at 9 a.m. and then it turns out when the schedule actually gets released officially, games are swapped out. One's home, one's on the road. But Chris nailed it with the Giants opponents from weeks 1 through 18 now. I always get those numbers mixed up nowadays. But nice job by you there, Chris. All right, before we get to your questions, thanks for everybody jumping into the queue. I want to talk about Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And where I'm starting right up top is with Jacob, who's reminding everybody to smash that like button and the subscription button for Pat on your way in. Subscribe to the channel. We're continuing to add more types of content to our offerings. And as we've talked about in the last couple episodes of Talkin Ball Live, really excited for our post-game lives coming from the stadium, wherever the Giants are, home or road, throughout the 2024 year. Jacob says, Pat, am I crazy thinking 5 wins before the bye? 2 Washington, 1 Minnesota, 1 Carolina, and either Pittsburgh or Cleveland. And Joey B says, damn it, Jacob, you beat me to it. I'm going to try and do Germany. I'm going to try and do Germany too. I'm really excited about that, going international. Fashu KB says 8-9 season. Interesting. Some optimism there for Fashu. And Antonio says, what are the Giants' expectations for John Michael Schmitz for this season? Definitely need him to show progress in year 2. We'll get right back to the JMS question, Antonio. First, want to talk about the schedule. So let's go through it real quick. Let's break it into quarters, okay? Let's start with the first 4 games. So the Minnesota Vikings come to MetLife Stadium Sunday, September 8th, 1 o'clock on Fox. This is a battle of projected last place finishers when you look at the sports books, of course. And you have Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy in the opposite quarterback room. You have former Giants head coaching candidate Brian Flores running the defense for the purple and gold. That's a beatable team, obviously. Malik Neighbors will have some inspiration to try and show that he's the next star LSU wide receiver going up against Justin Jefferson. I think it's no overstatement, everybody, to say that this is a game that the Giants have to win. Brian Daboll has to have this one. You're at home. You're against a team that, even though it has some talent, you've beaten in the playoffs 2 years ago, a different iteration of it, but still a lot of the same guys. The Vikings obviously have Jordan Addison in the wide receiver room now, and they're a different club. Danielle Hunter, though, not there as a pass rusher. So this is a game that could end up being close, should end up being close. The Giants need to win this game, though, if they want to get off to a fast start. I personally believe that the Giants defense, even if their pass rush does end up changing some games, I think it's going to be hard for them to come right out of the gate and be a strong defense early, running a new system, running a different scheme. I think Minnesota, with a smart offensive coach, will be able to score some points on the Giants and I have the Giants losing that game 25-13. Week 2, Sunday, September 15th, they're at the Washington Commanders, 1 p.m. on Fox. Now, we've talked on this show right here for many months now, frankly, about how it would be nice if the Giants got the Commanders early because Dan Quinn's a new coach there. They have a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Maybe they get some things going, but you want to catch them early when they're still kind of not comfortable. They're not experienced yet in their new roles, and maybe you can catch them. The problem is Washington is a very talented team as well. It has seemed at times that even though the Giants have had their number on certain occasions, that Washington was holding itself back. And Daniels is going to be, defending him is going to be a tough ask. I personally think that after watching the Giants barely eke one out in Washington while forcing 6 turnovers by their defense and special teams and having Tommy DeVito at quarterback late last season on the road against Sam Howell, I think Daniels is going to catch them. I think his speed as a runner, not just his arm, is going to give them problems. And I have the Giants losing that game 31-16 to fall to 0-2. And then we go to week 3, where the Giants, I don't like this matchup at all. I mean, I'd rather play the Cleveland Browns, in September on the road rather than going to Cleveland, Ohio in December, that's for sure. But I think handling Myles Garrett, Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, and that defense is going to be a tough ask for the Giants offense, even with Brian Daboll calling plays. This is the game, though, where we will learn, right, what the Giants offensive line truly is. Regardless of whether they're able to go 1-1 in those first 2 games, 2-0, or they slip to 0-2, this is still going to be the kind of matchup where it's going to say, okay, what is this offensive line really made of? Can we hold our own? Can we execute a competent offense, protect our quarterback, and score points? I think that's going to be a difficult ask. I have the Giants getting shut out in that game 20-0 and falling to 0-3. And then in week 4, Thursday, September 26th versus the Dallas Cowboys, Thursday Night Football, 8:15 p.m. on Prime Video. Now, obviously, we know Mike McCarthy, Brian Daboll, both coaching for their jobs. A lot of pressure on this one. You want to pick the Giants to win some of these key NFC East games, but unfortunately, they really struggled to beat, especially the Cowboys and the Eagles. The stats are sickening to read and look at, but this is what they are. Shane and Daboll are 0-4 against the Cowboys in 2 seasons, and they've been outscored in those 4 games 140-53. Giants have lost 6 straight to Dallas overall. Obviously, after last year's 40-0 loss in primetime in week 1, the NFL has backed the Giants out of primetime in week 1 and given them that early afternoon start against the Vikes. Of course, the Giants do have an opportunity when you look at the Vikings and Washington in particular in weeks 1 and 2 to kind of get themselves rolling a little bit, feeling a little bit better about themselves than what everybody is projecting, including myself, for this season. And then you have the opportunity maybe for it to look smart that as we go down the schedule here, the Giants are in some primetime slots that they could be flexed out of, but the NFL clearly erring on the side of caution with the Giants, but there are opportunities for them to be in some premier slots and primetime games if they hold their own. We will see. So that's the first 4 games. Antonio, to answer your question about John Michael Schmitz, I think the expectations for John Michael Schmitz are high because he was a 6-year player in college. And so part of drafting him in the 2nd round out of Minnesota last year was not that a rookie is just going to come in and play like an all-pro veteran, but that you were expecting a level of competence higher than a developmental young player. And, certainly John Michael Schmitz himself knows that he could have played better. Hopefully the guard play and that play of the trio that he ends up forming around him with John Runyon Jr. and either Aaron Stinney or Jermaine Illuminor helps him. I think consistency at the guard spots, Antonio, on both sides of Schmitz is a key factor. Obviously, he's responsible for playing better himself, but I do know that it was a bit unsettling last year just for the offense in general, for John Michael Schmitz even. You have a different person playing next to you virtually every game. At one of the Giants guard positions, I believe they had a different starter. It was something like 6 or 8 straight games. I have it in a spreadsheet here in my Google Drive. I'll have to dig that up and get you the exact stat. But I think the bottom line, Antonio, is they need Schmitz to play stronger. They need him to push people around in the running game, and you need to set a firm pocket for your quarterback, all things that need to get better. But I also think that the Giants can help Schmitz by having better and more consistent guard play. And I say this over and over again, but you need to find your starting five if you're the Giants, in my opinion, quickly, and you need to let them gel together and work together. You can't be rotating guys in and out and having competitions where you have people rotating in and out every snap. Jacob says, Pat, who is our starting O-line week one? Like if you had to say today. I've been saying, I believe, Jacob, that it could settle into Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Aaron Stinney at left guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, John Runyon Jr. at right guard, and Evan Neal or Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. I think there's a good chance that even though Evan Neal is going to get the chance to protect that right tackle job, that Illuminor ends up as the right tackle there, and that's what they start with. I know one of the fans in our comments that I interacted with today on the YouTube channel here at PL on NFL was suggesting that they believed Runyon Jr. would move to left guard because that's where he said he's most comfortable in his introductory press conference, and that Illuminor would end up at right guard. That's possible too, for sure. They do have enough bodies to create a competition at these spots. I personally don't think, and this is from talking to offensive line experts, people who know these players and know the positions better than I do, that going from guard to tackle and back from tackle to guard, those types of things, that can be detrimental and counterproductive. And I think it would be better for the Giants. Like if Illuminor is going to be your swing tackle or a guy you want to see likely filling in at tackle, let's say if Evan Neal starts and struggles, I'd rather not be playing that guy at guard and then moving him out to tackle, right, in an emergency. I'd rather, if you feel like he needs to be a reliable tackle, you just play him at tackle. I don't want to see the Giants having players unsettled in their positions. So whatever that means for those five. I am interested to see Runyon Jr. right or left based on what he said as far as being more comfortable on the left, because he did play the right for Green Bay. And Stinney was exclusively on the left for the Bucs, which is why I say that. Hunter Keller is again at the Celtics game right now, watching Talkin Ball live as he's watching the game. Hunter, how's it going over there? How do the Celts look? Thanks for tuning in while you're mobile. Appreciate you. Dr. Garrett says, Pat, what's up? How did you and the other reporters not crack up during that Pat Shurmur stare? Oh, man. Well, Shurmur's a tough dude. I mean, Pat Shurmur's the kind of guy, like, you hear stories like Pat Shurmur's the type of person who, if you screw with him and his people, like he'll stand up to you now. Like he's not afraid of confrontation. I mean, it's interesting. People forget because he doesn't look like it when he's walking around. Like he doesn't look like a modern NFL lineman, but he was a center when he played football. And so he's tough as nails, honestly. And so, when you're standing next to a guy, now he's not a small guy either. He just doesn't look like an NFL offensive lineman. But when you're standing next to someone who's imposing, not only in stature somewhat, but also in their personality, their history, you've heard stories about them in the past, how they've handled certain confrontations and situations, and then they're giving you that kind of look. It's a little bit different. Fasho says, hate to be optimistic, but if we are any better than last year, we can hopefully start 3-0. Yeah, I wouldn't count on that, but certainly there is an opportunity because of Minnesota and Washington being up front for the Giants to get some wins under their belt early. I would say, even though I personally have picked the Giants to have a bad record based on this schedule, I do think that, it's better having Minnesota and Washington up front, let's say, than having, the Eagles and the Steelers up front, right? Something like that, or the Cowboys again. You're at least going into the season looking at some opponents who have some strengths but have some flaws and are more in line with season expectations that your team has as well, right? Like Washington and Minnesota are both teams projected around similar win totals to the Giants, 6.5, 7.5, right? In those ranges. And definitely there's nothing to be quote unquote afraid of if you're facing Sam Darnold as opposed to taking on Dak Prescott in week 1, right? You'd rather that matchup. Of course, it'd be very intriguing if JJ McCarthy somehow beat him out and found his way into that starting lineup after the Giants passed on him, but probably unlikely. Antonio says, how do you think the Giants match up against the Vikings? Yeah, so I think Flores and, having, like, we remember the playoff game and Daniel Jones had that enormous game that essentially earned him that new contract. And the Vikings defense is it's not great, but it's better than the defense that you all remember watching in that playoff game. That was a very bad Vikings defense. Brian Flores coaching it. They're getting in some players now that fit what he likes to do. So it's a better Vikings defense than they're used to. But like I said, Danielle Hunter's gone from that pass rush. That's a tough player to handle, especially for the Giants offensive line, tackles positions trying to solidify if Evan Neal's playing there, et cetera. My one concern, now it depends, the Vikings quarterback situation. Can they get the ball down the field, right? Is Sam Darnold going to have the Baker Mayfield type season in Tampa a year ago? Is he going to find something special playing with Kevin O'Connell? Or is J.J. McCarthy going to step up and turn into a star early? Because Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, and I say it in the wrong order there, but Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and the Vikings skill position group, right? That's going to be a team that's going to be difficult to handle on offense. The Giants pass rush, of course, they need that to be a strength of their team. And so Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, we're going to talk about them a lot during this Talkin Ball Live, because that's going to have a lot to do, in my opinion, with when the Giants do pop and get a victory. I do think it's going to be because they have a good matchup against the other team's offensive line. And simply that's where it's going to settle in. But I do think Minnesota, if they can get the ball down the field and they can protect long enough against this Giants pass rush, I think it's scary the kind of damage that Minnesota could be able to do. And I do think they pop some big plays early as the Giants defense is working its way in. But again, the Giants will have opportunities there to force turnovers. We know Darnold can turn the ball over. If they disrupt that pocket and they make it uncomfortable, then that's the way that they can win a game like that. Obviously, every game also comes back to stopping the run, and Aaron Jones running for the Vikings. That's a player that could give you plenty of problems, for any team, for any defense. Obviously, we saw what he did to the Cowboys in the playoffs for the Green Bay Packers last year. So something to remember. Great with our luck. Get to see JJ look like Favre in person, says Steven. That's funny. JJan checks in, says, what's good, Pat? I think 5-5 at the bye is in play. Interesting. JJan, thanks again for your support. That's a good reminder. Guys, if you want to support the channel and you want your comment or question answered first or addressed immediately, you can buy a super chat or super sticker, and it elevates right to the top of the chat. I answer or address your question or opinion immediately. First, it jumps to the top of the queue. You don't have to do that, though. You can just hit the like button while you're here if you don't want to purchase a super chat or super sticker. And or you can just, put your comments or questions in the queue, and I'll get to them eventually. And even if you're just sitting here listening, I appreciate you being here. So JJan likes 5-5 there. I'm guessing, JJan, if you see 5 wins at the bye, I'm guessing you're giving them Minnesota, Washington, Carolina. Let's see. You giving them Seattle, and where's the other one? I guess maybe Washington again. I certainly understand what you're saying is that it's in play. I get what you mean. I don't think it's going to come down to that, but I see what you're saying. Description, what's going on? Good to see you. Jay Mazzella says 10 wins. 3-3 in division. Eagles and Hurts lose a step. Wow. If the Giants win 10 games, we got to figure out something for me to do. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, they made the playoffs. Remember, I did the video on TikTok with the clown mask. Maybe I'll do that again if they win 10 games. How about that? Jacob says, Pat, how much you bet on games? No, not betting. No betting. Malik and I not betting. Joey B says, we will lose to Minnesota. Well, so why do you think that, Joe? Jay Mazzella says, week 1 is a win. JJ starts and throws 2 pick sixes. If JJ outplays Daniel Jones, what's your reaction? For show, KB says. For sure, that is the ultimate worst case scenario for how this season could start for the Giants. If JJ McCarthy plays in that game and he outplays Daniel Jones, that is the worst case scenario for the Giants. There's no doubt about it. Absolute worst case scenario. I mean, let's put it this way. Brian Daboll is on the hot seat. The Giants were looking to get a quarterback. They ended up not going and getting one, not taking one, and they're running it back. If it happens that early, that quickly, they'll have egg on their face. And, that's the type of thing that can get Drew Lock in a hurry, assuming Daniel Jones starts the year. Dr. Garrett says, looks like Pat has us picking first next year. Dr. Garrett, I'm not going to lie. I have the Giants in play. What game and stat line does Daniel Jones have to prove as far as his leash as being a starter? Stat line? For sure, I think here's the bottom line. First of all, it's wins, right? If he's playing well enough that this team is winning, then nobody cares what the stat line looks like, right? Like if they're winning a lot of games, right? Now, to win, though, what does Daniel have to do? In my opinion, given the way this team is arranged, okay, this doesn't look anymore like a team that's going to focus on the run, right? This is a team that Brian Daboll wants to throw the ball with. This is a team that has switched over to putting its resources into receivers, trying to protect the pocket, give its quarterback time to throw the ball downfield. The quarterback has some mobility, can use his legs. I think what you're looking at with Daniel Jones is driving the ball down the field, but also not turning the ball over while doing it and using his legs to get some rushing yards. So I think you're looking for rushing yards in any game that he's playing in, where he's extending plays, using his legs to get first downs, even if it's touchdowns. Like, listen, we all know that Daniel Jones' touchdown numbers, especially in recent years, passing, are not where they need to be. It's a major reason why it's hard to have confidence. It's a major reason why the Giants were looking to draft a new franchise quarterback this year. But it does count if you run the ball in. It counts 6 points just like if you throw it in. And so what I mean by that for show is you're asking me what his stat line should look like for him to be competent and kind of putting his best foot forward and protecting his job. I would say it always with Jones involves some sort of rushing yards and oftentimes a rushing touchdown or two. But definitely the key for show, KB, is for Daniel Jones to push the ball down the field, so help create explosive plays while not turning the ball over. Early in his career, Giants scored more points with Pat Shurmur as his coach and OC, or play caller, I should say, but was turning the ball over a lot while doing it. Then the Giants reined him in. They were protecting him from himself, so even when the turnovers were improving and reduced, there wasn't as much playmaking going on. Daboll finds a way to work with his running ability and kind of a conservative approach that also harnesses what they can in order to win games. However, that was fleeting success, as we saw, and then 2023 injuries, but it all came crashing down. Hope that answers your question. Jay Mazzella says, if it goes the way Pat is saying, we will be firing everyone. Jay Mazzella, I really do think that at the end of this season, there are going to be major changes. And let me get to the next 4 games because we just went over my predictions for the Vikings, Commanders, Browns, and Cowboys. And unfortunately, I have them starting 0-4. So the Giants get their first win in my predictions in week 5 at the Seattle Seahawks. I know that's a tough place to play. I know the Seahawks have beaten the Giants in the last 2 years, 2-0 with a combined score of 51-16. So that's not exactly screaming Giants upset here. However, first of all, potential Drew Lock revenge game. Second of all, like I said, I think the Giants defense is going to need to I think they're going to need a little bit of a runway to get themselves going. This is a new system. It's a new coach. It's also more likely to be more zone, kind of cover 2 shell, bend but don't break, more so than attacking like Wink Martindale's. And I don't think necessarily it's not going to be the easiest thing just to get going out of the gate. They needed to get going out of the gate, but it's going to be tough. But, you're also going up against a rookie head coach in Mike McDonald in Seattle, who is not Pete Carroll, right? He's a guy who a lot of people have a lot of respect for. But again, just like I said, with an opportunity, let's say when you're facing Washington and Dan Quinn, he's not a rookie head coach. He's been a head coach before, but he is a first-year head coach with his new team. Mike Macdonald's never been a head coach before. So even if he's a good coach, can you catch him early enough here and while he and his new team are still forming their new identity? Seattle's talented. Geno Smith always sticks it to the Giants when he can. We know that. But I'm giving the Giants a 23-20 overtime victory here, and I have them at 1-4. In week 6, Sunday, October 13th, versus the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday Night Football. This game, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense to be in this window. And just so you guys know, the NFL can flex this game out. So the league is allowed to flex up to 2 Sunday Night Football games between weeks 5 and 10. So this is a week 6 game against the Bengals Sunday Night Football. So this is what I was referring to earlier when I said that the NFL has created a situation where, they have Giants in like a premier slot like this in case the Giants start fairly well. And then it looks like, oh, hey, look at this good matchup. Malik Neighbors has popped. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, maybe Daniel Jones has grabbed the job back by the reins and everybody's excited. And, the Giants are, so what is this? This is week 6. So let's say the Giants are 3-2 at this point. Now we're talking about, oh, yeah, can Jones do this against Lou Anarumo's defense, et cetera, et cetera. But in my scenario with how the Giants are faring here early, Burns and the Giants pass rushers, obviously they need to get to Burrow or it's going to be a long night for the Giants in this one with Burrow healthy. And so I think that there's a good chance this game gets flexed out of Sunday Night Football. I have the Bengals winning 30-7. You can see by some of my score predictions early, it comes back to that thing. I think the Giants defense, I think it's I think it's unwise to predict them to be a stingy, stout defense right out of the gate. They need to be for the team to succeed, I think, but I think that's very difficult for them to do. Week 7, I have the Giants against the Eagles. This game not in prime time on the original schedule, okay? 1 o'clock on Fox, Sunday, October 20th at MetLife Stadium. Saquon Barkley coming back for revenge in New Jersey, not in prime time. What does that tell you? It tells me that the NFL doesn't think it's going to be competitive or close. But also, you could say like we're talking about Sunday, 1 o'clock Fox. Obviously everybody's going to be watching. But again, we talk about the Cowboys dominating the Giants recently. Dable is 1-4 against the Eagles. He's been outscored 151-97 in those games. The Giants do hold a victory in their last meeting, 27-10 in last season's season finale. Again, though, the NFL could flex this into Sunday Night Football, just like they could flex the Bengals out of Sunday Night Football the previous week. So we will see. But definitely, I think Saquon has this circled on his calendar immediately. And I have the Giants getting bludgeoned 40-22 to fall to 1-6. And then they slip to 1-7 in week 8 with a Monday night loss on October 28th to the Steelers. 16-13. It's a close one. It's a stingy one. Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, sometimes they take a while to get their identity figured out. They obviously have Russell Wilson at quarterback. Not like he's unbeatable, him or Justin Fields. The Giants could take advantage of an opportunity here. But Pittsburgh is stingy. It's not easy to play there. It's going to be a tough environment to go into. That's a tough ask for anybody, especially this Giants team. All right, so that's our breakdown through week 8. Let's get to more of your questions. Sean Lee says, what's up, Pat? Is Carmen Bracillo going to bring his own blocking scheme, or is he going to adjust and adapt to the Dable Kafka scheme? Sean, this is Brian Dable's offense. So it's going to fit into whatever Brian Dable wants to run. I have not spoken to Bracillo specifically. He has not done an interview yet. I have not spoken to him specifically about whether he's putting in his own blocking scheme, coming in and suggesting significant changes. I will tell you, though, that this is Brian Dable's offense. And for it to function, it has to function the way that he wants it to, because it has to fall under that umbrella. We saw last year him pulling back from Kafka, giving things to Shea, taking over things himself. Obviously Bobby Johnson ends up being scapegoated. Just a lot of things that point to the fact that Brian Daboll is trying to get control of this offense because he knows that it has to start producing. And so this is why he was hired. This is why he's here. He had success in Buffalo with Josh Allen, and he needs to get it figured out. So Brasillo is going to fall under the umbrella of what Daboll expects and what Daboll wants to do. But, Sean, you are bringing Carmen in here to better develop and teach, in their opinion, better develop and teach those offensive linemen and form them into a more cohesive and effective unit of one up front. So Daboll certainly is going to solicit Brasillo's input and advice on how to accomplish that. I'll try to get to more details about whether he intends to change things about how that offense operates up front. But I would say, knowing how Daboll and this Giants staff and regime works, that everything starts and ends with the head coach in that regard. Steven says, Pat, tend to love our owners. Maris seems like a class act and he's got the fans back. But I'm starting to see points of too much interference. Eli fiasco, forcing GM to pay Jones, restrict Judge on staff. He needs change, no doubt. No better example than not only hiring Dave Gettleman, but also retaining him when Shermer was fired. Those two instances, absolute killers. Like, so much is made of Dave Gettleman, and people have lately talked about actually giving him credit because some of the Giants' best players still are some of the players he took with high draft picks. But it's like people forget that in 2018, they needed a franchise quarterback, and he took a running back at number 2 overall, thinking that the Giants were going to get one more run out of Eli Manning. Josh Allen was in that draft. Quentin Nelson was in that draft. I don't have to relitigate it. But then marrying him and Joe Judge together, that arranged marriage, and not bringing Judge in with somebody that he was aligned with, a general manager, when you fire Shermer. Another great example of that. Kyler says Runyon was a left guard and only switched because of the Packers rookie. Yes, he's played both, Kyler, for sure. So we will see if he's left guard and Illuminor is right guard and Neal is right tackle, as long as Evans playing well, then if that's your best 5, that's your best 5. I think the Giants have some depth, not depth, but I would say they have some competition at the interior right now. Hopefully it turns out that they have depth as well. Dr. Garrett says, can they just be competitive at the line of scrimmage? The offensive line has been a dumpster fire for too many years. Very hard to watch. You hope with Carmen Brasillo, James Ferentz, the assistant O-line coach, and now Chris Snee in there as a scout, that they can get that figured out. H5000 says, everybody overanalyzed Daniel Jones. He needs 2 true number 2 wide receivers, a top 15 tight end, a poor man Saquon, and above all, an average O-line, and he can finally be a solid starter. Jay Mazzella says, the Giants have a little easier schedule this year with more explosive offense and better pass rush. Do you see the Giants as a better team than last year? If not, why? Jay Mazzella, I think that if everything goes in an ideal direction for the Giants, that they can improve. So what I mean by that is Brian Burns plays to the level of that contract. The team stays healthy, which is a big one. Daniel Jones pushes the ball downfield effectively. Malik Neighbors proves mature enough and productive enough early to be a game changer on an offense that is operating without the guy who was the engine of that offense for many of these recent years in Saquon Barkley. The offensive line, even though you didn't hunt at any top part of the offensive line market, comes together and turns into a unit that is capable and respectable. And I say these things because this goes for any NFL team, Jay, but I do think there are other teams that have more talent, more A-listers, just a lower floor, if you will, because in the NFL, we know you're going to hit rocky patches. You're going to have certain injuries. You're going to face adversity, and you're going to be in a lot of close games. But even from Brian Daboll's management in those situations on, I think that the Giants' strong season in 2024 involves a lot of things going right and optimally. And I think that it's hard to plan for things to go that way. Certainly, though, with the way that the schedule starts, you have an opportunity to tread some water or even win some early games and try to set the table for some of your more difficult patches. I actually disagree, Jay, that this is an easy schedule. I don't think this is an easy schedule at all. I know they're playing the NFC South, but I personally think that this is a challenging schedule. The middle of the schedule, the three games right in the middle there with what is it? The Bengals, Eagles, and Steelers weeks 6, 7, and 8. That's tough. I mean, that presents a huge challenge. And then even in the last part, essentially after the bye, I mean, that's just murderer's row, you know? So I don't necessarily think it's an easy one. Came across this today, received some stats from bookies.com, and it had the NFL team travel totals for the season. So basically bookies.com compiled the total mileage and the number of time zones each team is playing in during the 2024 season. And the Giants pretty much slot right in the middle. It says their total mileage for the season will end up being 19,295, and they'll play in 20 different time zones. Or I guess they'll cross 20 different time zones, I guess, as many times as they go back and forth. I guess that's what that means. So 19,000 travel miles. So the lowest in the league is Washington at 10,000. And the highest in the league is the Chargers at 26,000, almost 27. So the Giants kind of slot right in the middle there as far as travel goes and where they're being forced to go. Let's see. Rich S. said, Rich, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that. He says, got Giants Eagles tickets. I pray Barkley plays so I can boo. That is really going to be a hostile environment. The stadium, I would think, will be rocking that night no matter what. I mean, it's still early enough in the season in week 7 where even if the Giants start poorly, the animosity for Barkley from a lot of people in the fan base definitely I expect is going to come through. Even though he has people who appreciate him, I think it's going to turn quickly, that from what I've seen on social media and talking to a lot of you fans. So that should be a crazy game no matter what. But the Giants are going to have to bring it, right? Because the Eagles are going to be motivated. I do think they're going to rebound. I don't know how much they're going to rebound because remember, they don't have Jason Kelce. They don't have Fletcher Cox on those two lines. So that can't be overstated, the significance of those players. But that's exciting, Rich, that you're going to that game. That's going to be an awesome one. Let's see. Let's get back into the queue. Kyler says, Pat, what are you hearing on who is starting against Minnesota, Jones or Locke? How is Jones' injury, and what's up with the injury clause? So, Kyler, no clarity on the starter there other than the Giants say they expect Jones to be the starter when he's healthy. We're still waiting to see if Jones is going to do anything like with the team in spring practices or minicamp in June. Brian Daboll did not provide clarification on that. Drew Lock, I believe, is going to benefit from having a lot of these reps with, skill players and members of the offense throughout the spring, for sure. I personally believe there should be competition at every position. So that includes quarterback. There are enough signs and tea leaves on, and just information, frankly, from sources of mine, that Drew Lock is going to have a chance to start games for the Giants this year. That it could even be a competition where Locke wins it, but that's not how the Giants are speaking when they're asked about it outwardly. So we'll see what happens. I do think if Jones is healthy, that they will end up starting him in that week 1 game and that he will enter the season as the starter as of right now, even though, of course, all these signs have pointed to the fact that they're trying to move on from him. The injury clause, essentially, if he is hurt entering the next league year, I think it's the 5th day of the next league year in 2025, then the injury clause kicks in and the Giants owe him, $23 million guaranteed for the season. If that ends up happening, there's 11 million, I believe, of his 30 million salary in 2025 is guaranteed for injury. And then another 12 is guaranteed on the 5th day of the league year. Just being on the roster as a roster bonus. So essentially, that injury can cost you a minimum there of $11 million. It's not just like if he gets hurt in a game, right? If he gets hurt in a game and comes back and then passes a physical after the season or plays more late in the year, that's not how it works. It has to do with like if he were to tear something again or hurt his neck again, something that would keep him out and that he went into the next league year injured. That's how that would affect it. Undefined says, when can we say it? Josh Allen made Dable, not the other way around. That's what we'll find out this year for good, Undefined, frankly. And I know people say, oh, well, it's only 3 years. Well, it was bad enough on offense last year and has been bad enough on offense for the bulk of 2 years where because they figured out ways around things in the first season, but it's not like they had any kind of explosive offense or quarterback play other than a couple games late in that season against Indianapolis and Minnesota, right? So Undefined, that's a huge question. I think it's a fair question to ask, and I think it's one we'll get an answer to either way this year. Vinny G-Men says, new subscriber, Pat. Great stuff, brother. Thanks for being here, Vinny. I appreciate you, man. Tommy says, health and wealth to all. Agreed. Michael says, I agree, Dr. Garrett. Offensive line must be significantly better. I think they allowed over 80 quarterback sacks by year end. Yep, second most in league history. I think the Giants will at least be 10 or 12 better on opening day than they are today. Joe Shane, Brian Dable are battling for their football lives. They are definitely battling for their football lives. That it is critical. It's funny. I know it's unfair to say out loud that like a week 1 game is a must-win game. I know that can sound ridiculous. I get it, but it is hard to overstate for the Giants how much it means to get off on the good foot. I think really the Giants have ridden their vibes both ways this season. Under this regime, I mean, you had week 1 in 2022, that inspirational victory, the 2-point conversion in Tennessee, right? All that. And the Giants started 6-1. And they end up going 9-7-1, making a playoffs, winning a playoff game in Minnesota. And even though they got blown out in Philadelphia, there were good feelings. Brian Dable won Coach of the Year, and they were able to sit there and reflect and say, like, here's something promising, right? But it really came down to the 6-1 start, because after they started 6-1, the Giants really struggled down the stretch there, right? What was it? 3-6-1, I think, in the final 9. So building that kind of that cushion was not only important for installing a new program, right, with a franchise that needed a lift, but it also sustained them when they were losing game down the stretch. It was hard for the Giants to fall out of it, given how well they had won early. And then conversely, last year in 2023, what do we see? They skid to a 1-5 start, including a 40-0 home opening primetime loss to a division rival. Guys get hurt. It spirals. And even though they go, 3-3 down the stretch, or they win some games down the stretch, the Giants end up skidding to a position where it looks like, listen, we dug ourselves such a deep hole, we can't climb out of it. And so that's all to say, when we're talking about Minnesota and Joe Shane and Brian Dable fighting for their football lives, that Vikings game and that Washington game in weeks 1 and 2, boy, do they stand up as enormous games, enormous tests. And, you love that you find out who you're playing now here in May, because now you can target on installs, on offense and defense as a coaching staff. You can start to target how you're going to face these teams. It's not the install of game planning like it is on game week, but it starts to get to that when you talk about spring, working your way in, just concepts, what you're talking about, things you're spending a little bit more time on. And then in training camp, especially, you're able to ramp up and put some things in that, in those first couple of weeks, especially in that first game, that you're going to want to have down pat and be able to run to perfection and execute at a high level to set a strong tone. Looks like we got a big time super chat in here. Andrew drops a $10 super chat in the live chat here on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate that. We are very grateful here to have you guys participating, joining us, and showing support for the channel. Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I will get to, if you have questions or comments, we'll get to those immediately. If you want to drop one in, we'll answer those. Okay, let's see. Let's get through the queue here. Guys, remember, we do these Mondays and Thursdays typically. on the Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard chat. This week, just doing Monday and Wednesday because we moved it up, this special Wednesday event for the NFL schedule release. I figured this would maximize our ability to kind of provide immediate reaction and insight to the Giants schedule. So really glad to have you guys here. Rosario says, hi, Pat, great chat room. Thank you, Rosario. He says he thinks they beat Minnesota. Tommy says, incompetent coaching, play calling, lack of situational football awareness, ability to elevate talent has killed the Giants for years. Now Dable will be out if he has last year's results. I agree. Rosario says that the Giants will go 2-2 in their first 4 games. It's possible. If JJ outplays Daniel Jones, doesn't that mean JJ would play well for us if we drafted him? Not necessarily, Mike, because Kevin O'Connell's a good offensive coach. So he might be able to get something out of a quarterback that Brian Dable could not, right? Conversely, like we said earlier, is Brian Dable going to prove this year that it wasn't just Josh Allen, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, but certainly, Mike, it will mean if he comes in, earns the starting job, beats out Sam Darnold, and wins a road game in week 1 in the fall of his rookie year, then absolutely that would be an indictment of the fact that the Giants didn't draft him for sure. It would be unavoidable for the Giants to escape that. Let's see. Okay. What else do we have here? What's good, Hirsch? Good to see you. Terry Hall reacting to my week 5 comment. I guess you're reacting to the fact that I gave them their first win in week 5, I think. Pray they know spread offense like first half of last year, and playoff defenses must know teams' capabilities, play to strengths, and should have run 12 and 13 personnel, help the O-line. Johnson the worst, got Jones hurt. Vinny G-Man disagrees with me. He says, no way the Giants start off 0-4. That is bonkers. We will see, Vinny. We will see. Hunter says, I imagine only coach that's safe is the defensive coordinator, but never know. No, if Dable gets fired, it probably means the whole staff's getting booted. I think we beat Minnesota and Washington, says Rosario. Hey, Wes, good to see you. Mike says the Giants were willing to give all their draft picks for a quarterback because Dable thinks he can win with a quarterback, and again, no offensive line. This GM and coach have to go. Vinny says, how do they beat Seattle and lose the first 4 games? Shaking my head. Well, Vinny, obviously you could play these scenarios out in a lot of different ways. I was playing it out that in the early part of the season, I think that the Giants have such high turnover on the coaching staff, high turnover on the roster, young roster, right? It's just going to be a difficult task to take all that and mold it quickly to win early games. Even if you personally think Seattle's a better team than Minnesota or Seattle's a better team than Washington, I just still think those early games in the schedule, that's going to be tough for the Giants to hit the ground running there. It just is. Now, but like I said, that's an opportunity as well. They very well could beat both those teams, Minnesota and Washington, right? That's just my scenario. But that's why I want to hear what you guys think. That's why I want to hear. Rosario thinks they can win 9 games. Let's see. Tommy says Neighbors, Nubin, Phillips, Theo, and Tracy will all contribute on day 1. That is possible. Hirsch admires Rosario's optimism. Hunter Keller says, pretty sure Russell Wilson and his wife are here in Boston. Oh, interesting. They're going to be there longer than Russ was in East Rutherford. Rosario thinks the defense is going to be very good. Vinny laughs at me and he says, I guess they're going to be 1-16. Let's see. All right. So let's get to, I went through weeks 1 through 8. So let's go through 9 through 13. So I have them at 1-7 through 8 weeks. Week 9, Sunday, November 3rd, against the Commanders at home. I have the Giants winning this game 21-19 to improve to 2-7. Let's face it. We know that they always manage a win or a tie against Washington every year, even when they're getting swept by these division rivals, right? So, there is explosiveness with Daniels now, Cliff Kingsbury's offense. But I do think, I mentioned it earlier, is going to come back to this a lot. the Burns, Lawrence, Thibodeau pass rush, there are going to be games where the Giants are playing an offensive line that is going to struggle to handle them for 4 quarters, right? And I think that we've seen with Washington, even though they've made some signings and additions on the line, I still think it's lacking a bit in certain areas. And even if it holds up at points, it's going to be tough for them to not be vulnerable against the pass rush like the Giants with 3 names like that. So I do think, just as we've seen in the past, I think the Giants eke this one out. A defensive touchdown, I'll predict, from Brian Burns, saves the home team here. So the Giants get a victory and can, at least temporarily stop the bleeding. Unfortunately, I have the Giants losing in Munich in Germany on Sunday, November 10th in week 10, 9:30 a.m. NFL Network Eastern time. This could be a battle between teams fighting for the number 1 pick in the draft. Burns obviously playing his former team, so he'll be motivated to try to have a monster game. The Giants are 3-0 internationally, but Dave Canales and the Panthers, he's going to have the Panthers, I think, on offense looking better than what you're used to. Who knows what it's going to look like exactly, but it will be better. And I think that the Panthers defense, especially Derek Brown, is a superstar on the interior. Like if Dexter Lawrence with the Giants is a guy who controls games, then certainly, that Derek Brown can be that as well. So I have the Giants slipping to 2-8, entering their bye. And then in week 12, the Giants come out of their bye, and it's Sunday, November 24th against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1:00 CBS. Bucks 27, Giants 17 to fall on 2-9. This is a playoff team, 3 first-round picks on the defensive line, including Vita Vea. And listen, this is one of those games I think that the Giants could possibly win. Even though they have guys like Mike Evans to deal with and a defense and Todd Bowles and the way they attack. I do think with Canales leaving, Liam Cohn in as offensive coordinator, not necessarily going to have the same kind of success on offense, and Baker Mayfield being undersized at quarterback. Baker Mayfield being undersized at quarterback, the Giants pass rush again could affect this game, but that's a tough team. They hung with Detroit in the playoffs, and I think that's a tough one. So I have them slipping to 2-9 there. And then week 13, Thanksgiving Day against the Cowboys in Dallas, in Arlington, 4:30 p.m. Fox. I think it's going to be a tough one. I think it could very well be a blowout. 47-20 Cowboys, 2-10 after week 13. And this could be the kind of game where they spend the second half talking about Dak Prescott as a potential Giants target in free agency. So Andrew, looks like you made some comments down here after posting that $10 super sticker, which I'm very grateful for. Andrew said, Pat, I was at a wedding with an agent for a player on the Giants. 2 big pieces of information. Andrew says, during Jones' contract negotiation, Shane got so mad he threw the chair and stormed out. Jones called Mara to bring Shane. Neighbors, amongst others, had relations with. Wow. Okay. So you can all read Andrew's comment. I'm not really gonna. I have no idea whether I have no idea whether something like that is true. But Andrew, thank you for bringing your insight to the chat. I appreciate that. Let's see. Andrew also says, posted verified information from an agent in the chat. Okay, so he's referring back to what he just said. Well, I actually, you know what? There are listeners here listening on audio, so I'll just read what Andrew said. Again, like I said, this is nothing that I have confirmed or am reporting or anything, but our friend Andrew here on the chat came in and said that during the Daniel Jones contract negotiation, Joe Shane got so mad he threw the chair and stormed out, and Jones called Mara to bring Shane in. And Andrew is saying that according to this agent, he said that he's talked to at a wedding that neighbors had relations with Jaden Daniels' mother while at LSU. That is obviously a huge accusation there. But Andrew, I appreciate you participating in this chat and supporting our chat. But certainly that's nothing that I'm going to comment on or address there. Okay, so let's see. All right, let's get back into the chat here. Little Rangers talk in the chat. I appreciate that. Love following the Rangers. I think they take care of business in game 6. Marjorie says that's a rough prediction there. I know. Bookend Tackle says the Giants will be 11-6. He's always an optimist. Tommy predicts that the Texans will be AFC champions and Stroud will be the MVP. Oh boy, I like that. Lewis says, I'm rooting for Saquon to get 300 rushing yards on the Giants just to rub Joe Shane's nose in it. Interesting. Hirsch is concerned about the quarterback position and not a believer in Daniel Jones. Tommy says Johnson was not a scapegoat. He was so trash, super trash. Kafka and him did not put together the right scheme at all. We will see, Tommy. We will see, because Bobby, of course, is now Washington's offensive line coach. So he stays in division, and we will see if he's able to hold down against the Giants pass rush. Rosario says, I think the O-line is better and receivers and tight end are going to be productive, 8 or 9 wins. Michael says, I just saw that New York will be featured on HBO Hard Knocks. Is that the first time they agreed to be on it? Very interesting that that the Giants are doing Hard Knocks off season. Yeah, it was coming around to their turn, Michael. I'll be curious to hear what everybody around the league thinks. Because definitely, I'm not sure every organization will be thrilled that the Giants got a chance to do Hard Knocks without having to have their cameras in the building for training camp, right? Which is what a lot of times what this entails. So it's kind of like the Giants are fulfilling their obligation possibly without having to have the cameras and HBO around during camp. This is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how much they're going to feature as far as what happened at the end of the season. With all of the coaching turnover and the dysfunction of Brian Daboll's staff and so many people either trying to get out or getting out, as well as the Giants' pursuit around the draft time for Drake May, which they ended up not getting. But, of course, it sounds like Joe Shane in the front office is going to be front and center, when it comes to, front and center when it comes to that show. And definitely the way I view it, Michael, frankly, is this regime has been very aggressive in trying to craft its own narratives and trying to kind of get out ahead of what it feels like the media might be writing or saying, and trying to push, their version of either the truth or just their own opinion and have it be loud and get out there early. And so I think this is another example of, Shane and this Giants regime trying to set a narrative and create a reality that people will believe about how they operate. So I'll be interested to see, what gets in and what doesn't. Marjorie says she's more optimistic than I am. The defense is better and wide receivers, not sure about O-line or QB. Tommy says black cloud over the Giants for how they did Tom and Eli, completely wrong. It's been the worst, since all these coaches and GMs. Marjorie can't wait for Hard Knocks. Tommy says, everyone in the chat, make sure you hit the like button, support the Giants channel, Talkin Ball. Thank you, Tommy. Kyler said, do you think the Hard Knocks show will show the Giants trying to trade up for Drake May, or will they sugarcoat it because Jones is still here? Maybe show the Wink argument. Unfortunately, I doubt they'll end up showing Wink and Dable. That would be amazing television, though, obviously, if they did. Maybe they'll show Mike Kafka looking dumbfounded when he got a promotion after being a part of one of the worst offensive seasons in Giants history. But really, it's just under the guise of trying to prevent him from leaving for a lateral job for the Seattle Seahawks, right? That'd be interesting to see. Drake May, I want to see something related to that. I'm not optimistic, obviously, but it'll be interesting to see what makes it in, what doesn't. Brolo says anywhere but Philly, he wouldn't have cared where Saquon went. Jonathan says, anyway, Daves gets fired if they start out the way you are thinking. Yes, I think that's what it would lead to. Mike says, do you think the show Hard Knocks will expose the lack of ability of Daboll and the GM? Well, they'll be part of forming it. So I think it'll be, some rose-colored glasses version of the way things go, unfortunately. And I'm not just talking about the Giants here. This is just a comment about these shows in general. A lot of times it functions essentially as a version of, if not propaganda, then kind of an airbrush version of what they want you to see. And what I mean I I mean, it's the organization, it's the NFL Films, it's HBO. There's a lot of editing that goes on before you see what you see. I think I do believe that the Giants are extremely sensitive to how they are seen too. And I would say most NFL teams are. And so I don't think we're going to see a highly critical, behind the scenes documentary. But I could be wrong. Lewis says, if I were a player and the Giants with the Giants and they didn't want to pay me, but the Cowboys would, screw you, pay me. Yeah. Hey, that's right. Tommy says, we need the chat. Hit that like button. It costs nothing. That's right. Giants Chronicle says, Pat, are the uniforms being released tomorrow going to be all uniforms or just alternates? Don't know that, Chronicles. Don't know exactly what the Giants have planned for that specifically, but they're definitely kind of doing a consistent rollout of different ideas or different developments for the 100th season here. All throughout the week, including the schedule release, Germany. You saw the logo before. We'll have the uniforms coming down. So stay tuned for more from the squad there. Mike says, do you think the Giants' lack of good draft picks and the loss of players will show their lack of depth? Yes, I think that they need a lot of things to go right because they haven't either added A-listers at certain players or they don't have sufficient depth in certain areas. And even part of the reason that sometimes Gettleman's name gets referred to right now in a positive light is because Shane's drafting has not been pristine. If Shane were drafting really well, no one would be talking about Dave Gettleman drafting a few of the Giants' better players right now. But people do refer to that because the Giants haven't stacked over top of those guys sufficiently. Michael Sarasso says, anyone else see that silly idea by Fox Sports that Dak Prescott will be a choice for Giants to match up with Bill Belichick? Yeah, so Michael, talking to people around the league, I've been working on trying to figure out exactly what the best options for the Giants would be next year. And if they went the free agency route, Dak is a name that comes up a lot. Now, is that really going to be the way the Giants go? That's a whole nother conversation. I mean, Dak certainly would want to get paid in free agency, and New York's a great place to play, obviously from a brand standpoint, especially. But, from playing in Texas to then coming to New York and dealing with those taxes, is Belichick really going to want Dak? And especially, again, when it comes to even Belichick and making his decision about where he's going to coach, will the Giants be a talented enough team to attract a high-end starting quarterback? Not to mention that the Giants are a team that is up against the cap, right? And if you're moving on and you're firing people and you're starting over, don't you want to get on a rookie quarterback contract? Like most people, when you talk to in the league, what should the Giants do if it all goes poorly this year? Their answer is no. Don't go out and pay a guy like Dak Prescott. Don't go out and pay anybody big money on the free agent market. Just go find a quarterback in the draft and develop, get on the rookie deal, clean up the salary cap. And I know Giants fans don't want to hear stuff like that, but then that would be the alternative, right? If you think Dak Prescott can lift you over the top as the Giants currently constructed, even if this season goes poorly and you want to spend big bucks on him, then that's what you want to do. But there's obviously differing opinions on that. Robert says half the starting O-line will be new players. It should be much better than last season. Well, it needs to be, Robert, or else. Omar says, Pat, you're the man. Always enjoy tuning in. Thank you, Omar. You're the man as well. Thanks for being here. Tommy says Johnson was the worst. Kafka needs to go. Brasillo will make lemonade with lemons. Tyrone Tracy will be a star. Daboll play calls because Kafka must go play calling like we have Patrick Mahomey Jordan back there. I got you. Mike Adagio says Hard Knocks will expose the lack of talent, the head coach and the GM. Giants Chronicles, what's up? Good to see you. Says, Pat, will we be able to meet up at the game on Saturday? Yes, I will be there. I might not be there for the full event because I have some family stuff later on, but I'm going to try to get there mid-afternoon and be there for a couple hours before I have to jet. Definitely planning on, I think what I'm going to do, frankly, Chronicles, is anybody who wants to meet up at the Dexter Lawrence Celebrity Softball game on Saturday at Clover Stadium in Pomona. I think what I'm probably going to do is, as I'm headed there, when I get the lay of the land, is I'm going to post on Twitter and just say, hey, I'm going to be at this section, whatever, for this amount of time, right? Or something like that. Like we'll pick a spot. If I'm there early enough and it's just in the parking lot, we can do that as well. But definitely will get you info. Just follow me on Twitter. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, P Leonard NYDN. And I will definitely, tell you guys where and when to meet up. All right, let's get to more of the schedule I have here. All right, so where are we next? Did I drop one of my sheets? Where did that go? Okay, so I believe I gave you guys up to the Buccaneers game, I think. No, Thanksgiving Day, right? We covered Thanksgiving Day in week 13 against the Cowboys, Giants losing big and falling to 2-10. So week 14, they take on the Saints at home. Now, the Saints embarrassed the Giants last season, 24-6. That game was at the Superdome, though. Tommy DeVito at quarterback. Giants got pushed around, but, they'll have a better QB for this game. They'll be at home. The Saints were only 4-5 on the road last year. Dennis Allen is not – like, Dable struggles in these game management situations, but I think he can still beat Dennis Allen. And I think Shane Bowen's defense, which, as I've said in my scenario, have struggled throughout the season and started to kind of put it together here and there. At least they shut down Derek Carr in a game like this, and the Giants win 16-13 and improve to 3-10. Then after that, unfortunately, they host the Baltimore Ravens. And Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, even though the Ravens offensive line is a question mark right now as it's currently assembled. So again, this is a game where the Giants pass rush could make some big impact plays, could keep the Giants in it where you maybe wouldn't expect it because of the Ravens' pedigree and talent level. But I just think the Ravens offense can be too much in a game like this. And I have the Ravens 31, Giants 7, 3-11 record going into week 16. And, frankly, at this point, the Falcons are a team, like this is another game where now this is a team that could be humming down the stretch and they could end up being a team that nobody wants to play, or they could be the same old Falcons where, like, even though they have some good pieces, they just don't put it all together. They lose some close games, they lose some leads, they can't finish, right? But Raheem Morris is a very respected coach. And I think going into that dome, whether it's Cousins or Penix Jr., I think that it's just going to be a really tough late season game, especially with the Giants already out of it at 3-11 for them to win. Falcons 26, Giants 16, Giants fall to 3-12. And then let's just finish it out here, and then we'll get back to your questions. I have the Giants beating the Indianapolis Colts in week 17, 14-10, improving to 4-12. Of course, this could be the kind of game that Jonathan Taylor has 300 yards in. He can do that to anybody. But middle linebacker Bobby Okereke, a leader on this team, doesn't let it happen. He wills the Giants to a victory over his former club, and they improve to 4-12. But then, unfortunately, they finish against the Eagles and fall 38-13 in a blowout. Obviously, in this scenario, that would be Brian Dable's final game as head coach and could be Joe Shane's final game as GM as well. This is just in this scenario. But, in my scenario, I have the Eagles and Cowboys kind of still vying for the NFC East down the stretch. And, so Barkley and the Eagles put it to the Giants in this game, and it ends up costing some of Barkley's former bosses their jobs. So my early prediction for the Giants is 4-13. I predicted in, I think it was March, that 6 wins. I predicted them to have the same record they had last year, 6 wins. And that was my prediction, even just looking at their schedule and their opponents and thinking about what their team looks like versus others. But When I looked at how this schedule broke down, for me, it came down to this. Will the Giants get a couple early wins that help them tread water until they run into those rough patches, or will they start slow and it'll be difficult for them to dig themselves out? I could be totally wrong. I hope I am. I hope the Giants have more victories than I predicted here. And let's be fair too. When I get to training camp and I watch this team on the grass, I do this every year, right? When I watch them on the grass, when I see this team form, when I see what they look like on the field, we will, going into the regular season, do a final record prediction for the Giants. We will do a final prediction where we tell you once and for all, here's the number. But as I sit here right now, my rapid reaction to the Giants schedule coming out here is I have them finishing 4-13. All right, let's get back into the queue. We have a super sticker or a super chat come in from British Gridiron Films. What's up, British? He says, let's go. Giants in Europe. Got my flight to Munich sorted. Giants 3-0 over here. Playoff appearance each international series year 2. Omens. That's right. Isn't that interesting that the Giants have been in the playoffs every year that they've played in and won those international games in London? Fascinating stat. So you hope they get a victory against Carolina, and you hope they get back to the postseason for sure. All right, let's see. Tommy says the Giants will have a lot of coverage sacks. That'll be tough. They are very young in the secondary. Undefined says, I'm with Pat, maybe 2-8 in the first 10. Not good. Tyrone says, I think they can win 10 games. Pat, are you trying to get the coach and GM fired? I think the Giants can win 10 games. I think they have what it takes. No, Tyrone, I'm not trying to get anyone fired. No, not at all. I'm just telling you what I think is going to happen based on my opinion of their team, my opinion of their staff, my belief that the amount of turnover they've had coming out of last season, plus the fact, let's be honest, they don't keep players healthy. Like if they were a team that kept players healthy, it would be a different projection probably of how they might fare. But they haven't been able to do that. So that factors into the equation as well. Tommy says, you're tripping, beating the Panthers easily, bro. What are you smoking? Pass that this way. Panthers have no chance. That's the game to put all your money on. Whoa. Tommy, don't put too much money on that one, man. You never know in the NFL. Like, I will say this, and in fairness, listen, I'm not sitting here telling you that everything's going to work out the way I say. I don't know. These are just my thoughts based on my informed analysis, right? I'm not some know-it-all here, right? There's years where I predict things and they're right on the money. And then there's years where I think something's going to happen and the opposite happens. I mean, that happens to everybody in this business. But the joke I was going to say is the one type of pool that I always hated doing is the survivor pool, where because especially early in the season, you never know. And any given Sunday really is a thing in the NFL. Not at every level of football and not with every game, but it really is a thing that in the NFL, these guys are all good enough where if you walk in assuming you're going to win, you're going to get stomped. And so sometimes teams go into games that they look like they should win, or they're, clearly they're the better team or more talented. And it ends up that they overlook their opponent and they're overmatched and they get spanked. Right. So sometimes that happens. But no, if you guys are in here and you're new to me or this chat or my coverage, I think I have a really good track record of being accurate as far as assessments of what the Giants look like and what they're going to be. Of course, their playoff year in 2022, the schedule was favorable that year, but I, as well as many others, did not foresee or predict what happened that year. So we obviously had to say, okay, not only take the L, but also give the Giants credit where it was due. But that said, there's no negative agenda here. Like I'm tired of covering losing football. It's covering losing day in and day out, and futility is it's not a recipe for what's the word? Like, when teams win, everybody's happy. Writers get to write books. You get to go to the Super Bowl with the team and cover them in Miami or Vegas or wherever they're going, or New Orleans, right? And you get on television more. It's high profile. winning is good for business. Okay. So winning is good for business. So if I predict them to go 4-13 and they go 13-4, I'll happily hear everybody tell me I was dead wrong, because the team will be doing well and we'll be going to playoff games and it'll be a lot of fun. Ash says, Pat, I wasn't able to tune in since the draft. I just don't understand how we're going into the season with Daniel Jones as quarterback. 3-13 or 2-14 is my prediction. Yeah, Ash, bottom line is Daniel is a guy who, I don't completely write off Daniel, certainly as a competitor, and he's had some productive games. My concern is the combination of, it's hard to expect him to elevate a team, especially one that is lacking in talent like this one at certain key positions. Everything needs to form quickly around him right now for it to pop. And also, the injury history scares me, because the 2 neck injuries with how he runs so frequently, not to mention coming off the ACL, is he going to be able to run early the way that he needs to? Maybe in a straight line, but is he going to be able to cut, right? Those kind of things. There's just a lot of question marks about not only his play level, but also his health and being able to sustain and count on him. That's part of it. It's being able to count on somebody who's at that key position, from a health standpoint, not just a play standpoint. Tyrone says, Pat, right, I saw that already. Chronicles says, Pat, I think you're over-exaggerating how bad the defense will be. I mean, the O-line has had some solid additions that are actually good, and they have upgraded defense significantly. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, Brian Burns is a good player who they didn't have last year. Who else are you referring to on the defense that has upgraded the defense? I mean, is Tyler Nubin better than Xavier McKinney? Is Cordell Flott on the outside better than what Adoree Jackson was last year? I mean, you hope so, right? But then is the next slot corner as good as Flott and what the Giants had in a rotation last year, right? Bobby Okereke, very good player, good signing. Will he sustain that incredibly high level of play, right? Will Dexter Lawrence continue to dominate? Will Kayvon Thibodeau improve? You can't, those are things that if they happen, the Giants elevate. The defense becomes good, but really, it's just easier said than done to just bring in a new, less experienced, less successful in his career coordinator and patch it all together and go. Robert says, no, thank you to Dak Prescott. Tommy says, I agree on some things you say, but the record you have the Giants going, don't bet on it, brother. You will look back at this take and say, what was I thinking? Hey, I hope so. Let's see. Chronicles says he does not believe Andrew's agent take from the wedding. Alex Jackson says, evening, Pat. Currently listening in my drive home from work. Hope all is going well. Go Big Blue. Thanks for listening, Alex. I appreciate you for doing that. I love how everybody's always tuning in from wherever they're at, and what I mean by that is we got Hunter at the Celtics game. We got Alex driving home from work. We got some people at home. We got some people traveling. And that's what I love about this. Check in from wherever you are. Mike says, Pat, I would just like to say how much I do not believe Andrew. Yeah, I debated whether to read that or not, but it's also Andrew is providing something that he feels like is important insight on the team. So I wanted to articulate that, he was presenting that information from somebody that he talked to, but we're just chopping it up. But certainly there's nothing that I'm reporting for sure. Andrew says, Chronicles, why would the agent lie? Literally said that he immediately believed it. Stephanie says, Pat, don't let Pat fool you. He moved to Wednesday so he can watch the Rangers close out the Hurricanes. Let's go NYR. You know what, Steven? That's not the reason, though. I am glad that I'm now free to watch the Rangers. But actually, I'm going to miss part of the Ranger game because I'm going to Gary Myers' book signing event at Bookends in Ridgewood, New Jersey. It starts at 6 o'clock. And Harry Carson and Leonard Marshall are going to be there with Gary. It's going to be talking, reminiscing, telling stories, and then signing books. And so that's going to be fun. And then looking forward to catching probably the second half of the Ranger game after that. But if you guys are around North Jersey, in New York, upstate New York, 6 p.m. bookends. So that's Thursday, May 16th. And great bookstore, great people there. And every time I go over there for a book signing to support friends, it's always a great event. So, make it there if you can. But Steven, I love the comment, man. You're not too far off. Tyrone says, the GM and coach can't survive another bad season. I think they have more talent than the team that won 9 games 2 years ago. I think they win 10 games. Okay. A West says, Pat, any shot at a cameo from you in Hard Knocks? Possibly, A West. I will say I have not been asked to sit down for an interview for Hard Knocks yet. I would not think that the Giants would promote me on Hard Knocks. That would probably surprise me. I think there are other people who, let's say, tell their side of the story more than their preferred side of the story. Or I tell their side of the story. There are other people who tell the Giants' preferred version of certain stories who are more likely probably to get asked to do a sit down if that happens. But I have seen the cameras around. I did notice them actually at rookie minicamp. I noticed a camera crew that looked different. I didn't recognize. They were not dressed like Giants employees. They were, black hoodies and jeans and, kind of baggy jeans, stuff like that. And, you go to enough events, you recognize people who work with different crews and are producers for different types of sites or whatever. And I actually asked someone with the Giants, I was like, what's this extra camera crew doing here? Is that an additional crew from somewhere else outside? And someone with the Giants was like, no, that's our people. And then like 2 days later, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, HBO has been filming us for the last 4 months. It's like, yeah, no, I know, I asked, but somebody told me that it wasn't true, right? It's like, so this is the stuff we deal with. Michael Knight says, what's going on, Pat? Michael, great to hear you here. Giants Chronicle says, Andrew, sometimes agents will sugarcoat stuff or make things up. Take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, but you always have to listen, take it in for sure. Hunter says, Giants knew they were on Hard Knocks then months ago because how would they have that video? Oh yeah, no, of course they agree to it, sign off on it, and do it. So yes, when they decided how they were going to handle breakup day and fire certain guys on the staff and then make it look like the defensive coordinator was a maniac when really the defensive coordinator was just leaving because it was an untenable situation. And then there were several other coaches who were leaving as well. Yes, they already knew that they were going to be on Hard Knocks. Joey B says, legacy for home, color rush for away. No doubt. Rich S says, as a realistic optimist, 9-8 is the only correct record prediction. Rich, that's fair. That's fair. Like as far as like if you're an optimistic, you can only go so far. Hunter says, I agree with Joey B with legacy and color rush. Bill Hartnett says, I watched the Giants uniform video about 5 times, pausing it. There's a 1925 reflection on the helmet at one point. Interesting. Undefined says, I wonder if Daboll lost weight for Hard Knocks. Makes me think he's even more of a nut job narcissist. I definitely think it's for health reasons, Undefined. But I will say if I was going to be on camera that much, I would probably try to look a little bit better too. Jeff says, what's up, Pat? Jeff, welcome, man. Joey B says those are our best uniforms. Andrew says, no comment on Joe Shane throwing a chair and Jones having to call Mara to get Shane back to the negotiating table. Andrew, no, I will say that's very interesting. No, like I said, I'm grateful for you bringing all of that insight over here and telling us that and sharing that with us. I appreciate that. As far as that, I mean, if that's what happened, then definitely that adds up too, because you have Joe Shane trying to stand his ground on because this is how everything I know about what happened is Joe Shane stood his ground and was trying to stand his ground on what he believed Daniel Jones was worth and on not trying to overcommit, right? But also reward him and operate within the construct of what the Giants are doing and want to do. And so definitely down the stretch, the way that was going and they were grinding it out, it was getting frustrating for sure. That's fascinating insight if that's what happened. I mean, we do know that Mara and Jones talked on the phone in the final hour, so maybe that's exactly what happened there. And that's why they ended up on the phone in that regard. So that could be it. Certainly, if Joe Shane was at that point going to, I would say this, Andrew, and I'm not reporting this, I'm reacting to what you're saying. If Joe Shane was ready to stop the negotiations and tag Daniel at that point, and instead Mara's phone call led them to sign him, then that would be horrendous, right? Like that can't be what happened there. That would just be completely unacceptable. But I do know that the Giants' plan was to tag Daniel and sign Saquon until it became the opposite, which is just ludicrous to me. We have a $5 super chat in the house from Ryan. Ryan, thank you. Welcome back. He says, hey, Pat, is there a scenario that plays out in the preseason where Locke is QB1 for week 1? Could the receiver room hold weight in this decision as well? Ryan, I will say this. If Drew Lock is the clearly better player on the field, I'm not saying that, listen, I think it'll be hard for Drew Lock, even though he has talent, but like given who he is, Ryan, I think that it's going to be hard for Drew to look so much better day in and day out than Daniel that it just becomes obvious he should be the starter. Like, in other words, Tyrod Taylor, there were plenty of times where you looked at him and you said, like, why isn't this guy playing, right? I'm not sure. Now, we're going to give Drew Lock every opportunity. I'm not sure Drew Lock is going to wow to the point where it just becomes so obvious that you can't hide it. But that's the scenario, Ryan, where if during training camp he's standing out over Daniel day in and day out, whether it's even if he's not getting any first team snaps and he's only running the second team, then eventually you just can't hide. You can't fool the locker room. And really, Ryan, part of the problem last year was, like, even though DeVito had that run, when Tyrod got ready and was ready to come back with those broken ribs and they didn't let him at first and they kept him on the bench, like the whole locker room knew, like, wait a second, why are we not playing the better quarterback? You know what I mean? No offense to Tommy, but it was just, that's what it was. So like they've already done this. So, the scenario, I think, Ryan, is that now, by all accounts, Daniel and the Giants are saying they expect him to be ready and that kind of thing. But if his running ability, Daniel Jones's running ability and mobility is not there close to that 100% that he needs, then that would be, I think, the most likely scenario that would result in Drew Lock being the week 1 starter. Joey B says, Pat, bring me a Talkin Ball hat or shirt Saturday. I'll pay Venmo or whatever. Chronicle says, that's what I'm saying, Joey. I will be there. Tailgate starts 12 p.m. Gates open at 2, or is it 2:30 maybe, I think. On the hats and T-shirts and sweatshirts, I do have swag coming as I turn off this light here. Hold on, give me 1 second. The swag is coming. I will have a link in the Talkin Ball YouTube page at PL on NFL. So here on the channel, I will get a link. The store is going to be up and running soon, and you'll be able to order Talkin Ball gear on there. So I won't have it ready to walk up to the softball game, but it is going to be available soon. Definitely before training camp, but I'm hoping before the end of May is my hope. To at least have something there, even if it's just like a T-shirt and a mug, or a T-shirt and a glass, or something like that, or a hoodie and a T-shirt. But those are coming. The logos are in the works. Let's see. Bill Hartnett says the video of the uniforms is on the Giants Twitter feed. It's a 10-second clip, but once I saw the reflection, I started doing the Blade Runner enhanced treatment. Enhance. If they get to 3-10, why do they wait to fire Daboll, says Hunter. It's possible in that scenario that they wouldn't. Like, it's possible in that scenario that they wouldn't wait. Chronicles says, Pat, be honest, have you ever picked the Giants to win a game? Nah, come on, Chronicles, I have. I mean, listen, I picked them to beat a Saints team that beat the crap out of them for 4 quarters down in New Orleans last year. Marjorie says they can't be worse than last year. Chronicle says, come on now, the Giants aren't losing to the Panthers. That's wild. Tommy says, wide receiver Ottman Bell will be a beast for us. Elijah Chapman is underrated. Casey Rogers, Johnson. I hope they make the team. And then Okay, throwing out a lot of like young developmental players you think are going to pop. You got to hope, right? Intel says they'll win 6 games. Bill thinks there'll be a 7-win team this year, and he's trying to be optimistic. At least they aren't screwing us over on the travel this year with a lot of back-to-back road games. No, that's for sure. The beginning of the season compared to last year is night and day, right? You had the Cowboys week 1 in prime time. Then you had the back-to-back with the Niners and the Cardinals there on the road, and the Niners obviously being one of the league's best teams. Wasn't an easy run there for the Giants early, and on and on. So definitely a more favorable setup in week 1 and 2, especially for the Giants. I don't like that Cleveland trip there, but, listen, you got to play everybody on your schedule. So, I guess who I would rather catch is like, how the back of it has the Bucs, New Orleans, and Atlanta back there. They're all teams that, like, are they unbeatable? No. They're not easy to play. They're not unbeatable. Quarterback matchups, like Derek Carr, for example, he doesn't scare you, but he did pick the Giants apart last year as well. But like, I would like maybe to catch one of those NFC South teams up front rather than having them all on the back end there, because I think they'll be better as they go along. But maybe if you catch them early, you can do some damage. Marjorie says, the most primetime games belong to the Niners, Cowboys, and Jets. Glad it doesn't include the Giants. It couldn't after last year. They had so many primetime games and fell on their face. You that's just what happens for any team. What's up, Pat? Says Savage Steve. Hey, Steve. I can't wait for this Hard Knocks. Very intriguing on what they allow in it. No, I'm looking forward to it as well. Gives us another thing to follow as we kind of gear up, as we gear up for everything for the season, for training camp and that kind of stuff. It's just another example of why, like, the NFL right now, content is king, and the NFL has just found a way to kind of keep our interest year round. And we're into it, right? Like, you can't get enough of it, especially when you're desperate for your team to turn it around. Tommy says, you have great takes, brother. Giants team won the draft with Burns and veteran O-line Brasillo, and the DC that plays zone, man, different coverages. Jones, if healthy, if better play calling, he wins games. Tommy, you fit a lot of points into each one of your comments, too. I respect that. You do a good job there. Alex says, do you think this roster is overall better or worse than last year? What about compared to 2022? Alex, I think the Giants roster at the moment has a chance to be better in certain spots. I do think the secondary concerns me because think about 2022. You had Julian Love, Xavier McKinney, James Bradbury. Let's see. Well, no, right. You had Adoree Jackson step in. You had Julian Love leading the team in tackles. You had Xavier McKinney. And you had, Leonard Williams, right? A veteran on the defensive line. Going back before that, though, you had Bradbury at corner. He was obviously with the Eagles now, Bradbury is not the player he was when he was first with the Giants. But I'm thinking going back to 2021, 2022, 2023. Like the secondary is an issue to me. Like Banks is a good player. I like Deonte Banks a lot, and I think he's going to continue to ascend. But if he is the guy that you're really counting on the most right now, he's still a young developing player. You have him, Nubin, Jason Pinnock, and Cordell Flott, and then maybe Drew Phillips in the slot. I think you're just counting on a lot of rookies, and you're asking a lot out of young players. So could those guys eventually be better? Could those guys eventually give you, more than what you've gotten the last few years from those positions? Yes, but is it going to happen right away? That, to me, is part of the concern that I'm raising when we talk about this. We're also, like, today, as we sit here and now, we're talking about, as we sit here right now, we're talking about this season. We're talking about this year's schedule, right? And so, when we talk about that, we are referring to, hey, yes, maybe these guys could develop into X, Y, or Z, but we also need them to be a certain thing right away. We need them to play at a high enough level immediately. And so, can they get there at some of those positions? Right. So Fabian Moreau, I was blanking on who else it was at corner back in 2022. It was Moreau. That was the name that I was completely blanking on. But definitely, I think the secondary is a question mark as far as improvements. Like, think about the inside linebacker position. Bobby Okereke is an improvement and an upgrade on what they had at middle linebacker prior to that. But the depth is questionable, right? Wide receiver, they have a lot of young talent. They have more speed in their wide receiver room. And obviously, we know Malik Neighbors is an upgrade and better than anything they've had since Odell Beckham Jr. So the receiver room is better. Is it perfect, though? Is it ideal? Jalen Hyatt needs to take another step for sure. Wan'Dale Robinson has to stay healthy and take another step. You need to have enough good players to slot guys in the right areas, right? Not ask them to be more than what they are. The tight end room, is it better? I mean, they've been trying to make it better. I don't think necessarily it is. You're hopefully getting better blocking from it initially, but if you lose Waller, and even if he comes back, if he gets hurt again or he's not the guy that you traded for, right? And as far as where else are we going? Offensive line, Alex, potential to be better, right? Potential to be better at offensive line. They definitely made some targeted signings and acquisitions there. So there's potential to be better there. I don't look at their offensive line and call it fixed right now, but I do think it has a chance to be significantly better. But they do need guys to play better who are already here, as well as their signings to live up to the expectations of what their contract suggests and entails. I mean, the quarterback position, based on the last couple of years, Tyrod Taylor was the best quarterback on the roster last year. So their quarterback position right now compared to a year ago isn't even as good. And so, running back position, not as good, obviously, with Saquon Barkley not here, but you are moving towards the more the type of running back and offensive scheme that Brian Daboll was looking for as well, based on the passing game. So running back position isn't as good, but are they getting what they want out of that running back position? John Kirk says, predicting a win-loss record in May is a silly exercise. There are so many variables during the course of a season that change. It's hard enough doing it week to week, let alone before training camp. Yeah, for sure, John. I just think, from my vantage point, it's something that with the daily news we do when the schedule comes out, just like a rapid reaction. And you do, in general, understand kind of the fully formed scope of what the rosters look like. Obviously, though, to your point, things can change, things can come into form, and certainly you end up seeing them on the field more and seeing more football to get to that point where you have a better read on what things look like. But, just trying to share information and also have fun talking about this back and forth. Flott, McLeod, Banks, Trey Newbin, Phillips, Johnson, that DB room without the terrible play calling will be way better, Tommy says. Terrible play calling? What are you talking about? I mean, they'll play more zone. I don't know what you're talking about, terrible play calling. They did lead the league in turnovers last year on defense. They were tied with the Ravens for the league. Matthew says the last time Daniel Jones had his back against the wall when the Giants didn't pick up his option, he led them to the playoffs, trying to be optimistic. That's absolutely true, Matthew. And he could, who knows, he could do it again. Justin says, Pat, thank you for all of your great coverage of the Giants. You're welcome, Justin. Thanks for being here. What are you hearing as far as the role of Jalen Hyatt in year 2? Do you expect sophomore step forward with the addition of Neighbors? Yeah, I mean, Justin, as much as they fight back against, or Jalen even has fought back against, the narrative that he's one type of receiver and not another. And obviously, like I've always said, his most impressive catch to me and best play he made as a rookie was that catch over the middle in Buffalo on 4th down, took a huge hit, held onto the ball. It was on the last drive of the game, I think, and they almost win the game thanks in part to that catch. That was impressive. That reminded me and showed people, I think, that he can be more than just a deep threat or downfield player running a go route. Now, that said, Hyatt's he had a 100-yard game against New England, but his promise and upside are more what there is to get excited about rather than his production and proven ability or proven production, I should say. And so I think he absolutely has to take a step forward with Neighbors in the fold. Like Neighbors is good catch and run receiver, right? A guy who's fast, can get open, catch the ball, strong hands, and can go and make guys miss. Wan'Dale Robinson is like a light version of that, right? As far as slot receiver, a guy that you're putting in jet motions, those types of things. So I think, honestly, if you're the Giants, the way you want to optimally utilize Jalen Hyatt is by unleashing his number one strength deep. Like, I know that's, you can't just do that every play, and you do want him to be able to do other things. And you don't want to give away what you're running just because you're putting him on the field. So you do need him to continue to work on that route tree and playbook to develop a well-rounded skill set. So his presence in certain areas at certain moments and in certain formations doesn't give away that he's doing this or someone else is doing that, or you're running certain plays. And that does happen in the NFL, by the way. Like if a guy is too much of if he's pigeonholed into a certain role, teams study you in and inside and out as far as your scheme and your tendencies. And so that does happen. Like when Jason Garrett was here with the Giants, for example, there were times where you could see the defense calling things out because they knew a certain player was in a certain spot. And that meant the Giants in this formation were running this, right? Like that happens all across the league. That's what pre-scouting is about. So you don't want that to happen with a guy like Hyatt. But I think in the end, you got to use what he's best at, which is downfield burner speed. I refer a lot to that Raiders game last year where he had two, I think, deep opportunities in the first half where he was, I believe, overthrown on both of them, or overthrown on one and the other was underthrown and knocked down or something like that. But bottom line, like he nearly had a monster first half and game in that big blowout loss to the Raiders last year where Jones ended up getting hurt in the second quarter, I think it was. And so I think that was a glimpse of like, hey, like, look what this kid can be. Let's see. Andrew defending his story and his information. Chronicle says, never ever could I see Shane throwing a chair, just not how he is as a person, and he's business. Throwing a chair is childish. Was it tense? Yes. Chair thrown his way over the top. Chronicles, I would defend Andrew on that point. You're saying it didn't happen based on what you believe a person looks like on the outside and how they profile and present themselves. I think, and this is a good example of like, as a reporter, like you don't go on things based on rumors and you don't assume things. And so I think, and I don't know if Andrew's story is correct on that or not from that agent about Shane throwing a chair. But what I will say is a lot of times the information I end up uncovering or finding out or being told in reporting, I get pushback just like that, where people who don't know that it's wrong tell me it's wrong because they believe it would be wrong, right? And so I would just say, remember that. Yeah, and it's fair for you to have the opposing viewpoint of how you think it would have gone, obviously. I'm just saying, just remember that a lot of the information that gets reported that ends up being true, like all these NFL teams and the NFL as a whole, as a league, they pay a lot of people in public relations staffs and communications departments to either push what they want out there or to prevent what they don't want out there from getting out. And so we as reporters in the media are working against those things. Now, I'm not just digging all the time for dirt, right? Like you're reporting on what is going on. And sometimes it leads you to inspirational stories. Sometimes it leads you to critical stories. It leads you to worrisome facts, leads you to encouraging developments, right? But then whatever you find, you report. And so I would just say, remember, sometimes you hear something and it sounds positive and you still have to run it down and find out if it's true. Sometimes you hear something and it's negative and you still have to run it down and find out if it's true. That's all I would say. Hunter is glad that Dable is getting in some shape. Yeah, no doubt. Good stuff. Hunter says he will definitely get some merch when it comes around. Thank you, Hunter. Looking forward to it. Joey B says, Pat, stop editing the comments as you read them. You got to keep it real, the New Jersey, New York way, authenticity. If Pat McAfee can do it, so can you. Joey B, are you referring to me reading what Andrew was reading? I guess that's what you were referring to about Andrew's comment, because I definitely don't edit people's comments unless like every now and then somebody says something that's like dirty and stuff like that, where I'll just say, okay, that's not necessary to get their point across. So that's all I do there every now and then, but you guys can see the comments come through. I put them up there. So, that was just, to be honest with you, the second part of Andrew's information there from that agent. I just don't want to be aggregated or someone to clip a video where I'm talking about that and saying that and suggesting that I am pushing a rumor, because like that's not what I was doing there, right? So I'm not interested in pushing something or being made to look like I'm pushing something that I'm not. So that was all that was. But I did recognize in the moment, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm just reading a comment by a dedicated fan who's in here sharing something that he had heard. And Andrew, I appreciate it. And so that's why I'm defending your right to say that, and the fact that not all information is positive, right? Andrew says Shane's downfall will be his own ego, internally different than the fan perception. Andrew's correct that there is a lot of ego in NFL front offices in general, and that some of the Giants leadership have very high opinions of themselves. I would say this, Andrew, too, not just specific to Joe Shane, but the Giants are a team that arrogance gets in the way, and it comes in different forms. It can be in their evaluations of their own players and beliefs in what the guys are and are not. It can be the fact that they underestimate members of the media and people's ability to get to the truth. A lot of different ways that it can show up, but definitely Andrew right on the damn nose on that comment there. Let's see. Kyler says they dropped a teaser on the uniforms on Instagram. So it says 5/16/24 in red letters. Yeah, I think that's what Bill was referring to. Kyler, I didn't see it yet, actually. I think it probably happened while I was on here. But that'll be fun. Bill said the Chiefs schedule announcement is funny, weird, but funny. Yeah, I'll go check that out. Do you think the Giants will be able to get a deal done with Darius Slayton? Matthew says. I'm skeptical they'll really give him a significant raise. Maybe they'll give him a little bit because they know that they need a key player, a leader, veteran type like him in the building, and you don't want to continue to have the reputation that you kind of drive too hard of a bargain with some guys who have done right by you, but could result in a trade if he goes that route. All right, let's see. Bill Hartnett says, well, I have thrown a chair after a loss to the 49ers. That's right. Achilles says, at this point, just spreading negative vibes. New season, just my 2 cents. No negative vibes here for sure. Listen, we could do an alternate reality version of that prediction where the Giants catch the Vikings and Commanders there in weeks 1 and 2. Favorable matchups. You start 2-0. So even if you lose to Cleveland and Dallas, it's 2-2. Then let's say you still beat Seattle, like I said, Achilles. So now you're at 3-2. So even if you lose to the Bengals and Eagles, now you're at 3-4. You beat the Steelers on the road, you're at 4-4. You beat Washington, that's 5-4. You beat Carolina, 6-4. You go into the bye, and then you come out of that. You lose to the Bucs, you lose to the Cowboys, you're 6-6. You beat the New Orleans Saints, you're 7-6. You lose to the Ravens, 7-7. You beat the Falcons, you're at 8-7. You beat the Colts, you're at 9-7, and you lose to the Eagles, you're 9-8, right? And I think that, so Achilles, to your point, I think Bill maybe was the one who said earlier that an optimistic view of this season still has them at about 9 wins. And I'm not saying that obviously, like, you never know. That's what I'm saying. You never know. I'm just going off of whether it's it's a combination of my information, my understanding of players, coaching staff, my understanding of how the league works, how players and coaches and staffs have to come together and acclimate, collaborate, and form and develop and produce, and how long that takes and how hard it is to do in a short amount of time. Also, I really do think anybody who thinks that, this is just negative vibes, like last season got really, really bad. And there are a lot of issues with how the Giants are operating and have operated. And I know that in the spring, it's kind of hope springs eternal, and that's fine. But it's hard for me to get around all of those issues and developments and things. So that's where my predictions come from. But certainly, like, we just went through the schedule, and I could get to 9 wins if I decided that's how it was going to work. So Joey B says, that's what I mean. Let the expletives fly. But I know it's fair. You got to be conscious of what you say. I get it. Someone said shit can earlier. I thought it was funny. You're right. I shouldn't have edited shit can. I didn't have to do that. You're right. Andrew said that he bet this agent over under 5.5 wins. This guy, Andrew, bet the under with 5. He bet the over with 6. He said it all depends on the O-line. If the line's bad, Jones will play scared, and then Giants pull him to find their own QB. Interesting. Sound like an interesting wedding. Dad Hat Daddy says, let's go, Pat. You got it, Dad Hat. Thanks for being here. Guys, it's been a lot of fun. Remember, we're sponsored by Bet Online and by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Essentia Day Cafe from El Salvador. It dates back to 1798. I drink it all the time when I do the Talkin Ball podcast with these special guests. I have more special guests coming up. As we sit here on May 15th, we got the Gary Myers Bookends book signing. The book is Once a Giant, A Story of Victory, Tragedy, and Life After Football. Go pick it up if you haven't already. So that's Thursday night, 6 p.m., Bookends in Ridgewood, New Jersey. And then we have, obviously, the Dexter Lawrence Celebrity Softball Game, sexydexygame.com. That is Saturday at Pomona, New York, Clover Stadium, I believe. And go to sexydexygame.com for information. And also watch the podcast I did with Brandon Jacobs, Giants legend, who's going to be at that event. I think it's a lot of fun, that conversation, and he provides more insight into it. Yes, Gary's book is on Amazon, Once a Giant. Here it is. Let me show you. This is Gary's book. It's an excellent book. Like, this is a good book even for an NFL fan. Like, Giants fans will eat it up. Like, every Giants fan should have this book. It's awesome. But even just an NFL fan who's not specifically a Giants fan, I think will get a lot out of it. Hunter says, what is a record that Daboll keeps his job? Oh, good question. I don't know. I mean, you definitely need to see progress. I mean, the team is so still looking to add talent in so many areas that I guess you could say that if they win 6 again, that, Shane and Daboll would make an argument for, look at our quarterback and look, this is a rebuild and maybe you skate. I do think from Mara and Tisch and the ownership standpoint, you have to see improvement though, like 7 or more. But they definitely don't, like, this is the one thing, like we talked about this here before. They don't want to fire people anymore because they keep doing it and it keeps backfiring on them, or they keep marrying guys together, like a GM and coach together that don't work. And then, it's so funny. Like now people talk about, you can't pull the plug after year 2. It's only year 3. It's like Joe Judge was promised 3 years and then he got sent out on the street. So, Bill Hartnett says the Giants schedule announcement isn't on YouTube yet. What the heck? Oh, interesting. Matthew says, thanks, Pat. This is great. Ash says, Pat, you're a legend. Keep it up. Appreciate you, Ash. You too. Bill says, NFL schedule release on NFL Network, ESPN2 only so far. Thanks for the show, Pat. Wow. Yeah, no, this was great. Try to do this with any event or anything that, is like a one-time deal to knock it out. Bill says, I have the book in my Amazon shopping list along with How Tight Ends Save Football. Going to get them both at Christmas, I think. Awesome. Ash says, is it worth it to get that book if I only started following the Giants in '06? Yes, because it'll give you a deep sense of understanding of the history of really the most beloved Giants team and the ins and outs of on-field and off-field. And also you'll learn a lot about what players go through after the game, which you'll see with the players that you know better now that you've been following the team as they are out of the league and moving on. Let's see. Alex says, thoughts on the new unis. Do you think new uniforms affect the team or the team's culture in any way, or am I pulling at strings? Alex, I do think bad uniforms are bad mojo. Like if a team's wearing an awful uniform, it's like, this team deserves to lose. I'm betting against them, right? Like that's one thing I believe, but I don't know. That's a good question. Dan Mazzina, the great Mandini in the house, says, Brandon Jacobs talked about practices toughening up players. How are they addressing that this season? Dan, that's a really good question. I am still in a wait and see mode on how much they change with that, because Brian Dable and Joe Schoen have acknowledged that they haven't done a good enough job with injuries, and they certainly know that they didn't have the team ready to play last year going into the season. So something has to change, but this is a player-friendly program. They do a lot of, maintenance and, they've been giving guys days off in training camp. I mean, I'll be interested to see, in collaboration with Aaron Wellman, obviously Ronnie Barnes is involved, will there be a push for significant change in that type of work? And not when there's all of this focus, right, Dan, on management of guys' bodies and proper workloads and that type of thing. But what about getting guys ready to play football, Dan? The NFL rules do limit, of course, the amount of the type of practices and the toughening up that Jacobs was talking about from a standpoint of how frequently you can do that on the field. And also it is a different day and age with sometimes how players react to things like that. But a lot of the best teams in the NFL, Dan, this is the best argument I can provide. And I don't think it needs to be said, but clearly it does to teams like the Giants. The San Francisco 49ers, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Kansas City Chiefs, they are three of the teams that practiced hardest in the league. And they are three of the best teams in the NFL. And they are three of the teams that down the stretch wear people down, right? And they end up kind of persisting physically. And so, Dan, that's something I'm continuing to work on from a story standpoint, and I'll have more that I'll be writing about it in the Daily News, especially come training camp. And I think Giants fans need to pay attention to that very closely, because I'll be writing a lot about it. I'll also be talking a lot about it when we're doing the lives during August. Hunter says, thanks again, Pat. Always enjoy these pods. Any chance you can get Plaxico on the pod? Let's see. Hey, we will see. We will see. I know I got an email today from a fan named Jonathan, I believe, who was suggesting that I get a lot of, Giants legends, like continuing like with Brandon Jacobs on the podcast because of the 100th year anniversary and kind of honoring that. And I agree with them. That is something that's in the works. Obviously you saw Jacobs on, but we're going to continue to work with, former Giants as well as current Giants to have players represented both past and present and really try to knock that out. Chris Snee's another great idea, Hunter, for sure. So yeah, we're going to have a lot coming. Michael Strahan, ambitious. Listen, we've gone 2 hours here. You guys are great. Thank you so much. I will see you. If I see you at Ridgewood's Bookends on Thursday, May 16th, great, 6 p.m. If not, I will keep you guys updated on my Twitter account on X, P Leonard NYDN, for where to meet up at the softball game on Saturday in Pomona. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Thank you as always for all of your support. Thanks to everybody who purchased super chats and super stickers. Jay Jan, Rich S, Andrew, British Gridiron Films, Ryan, Andrew again down the stretch. And Andrew, thanks for bringing that information, that inside info you said you had. Joey B says good night. Hunter says enjoyed the meetup. Have a good one. You guys have a great one too. See you next time on Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard.